Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, March 30th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Matthew Connolly, author of the Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets. And later in the show, Orly Noy, on whether or not the Israeli protesters really want true democracy. Meanwhile, the Senate votes to repeal both the 91 and 2002 Iraq military authorizations. 18 Republicans joined, but I'm skeptical that Kevin McCarthy will bring it up in the House. Netanyahu responds to Biden's criticism of his judicial overhaul desires. Well, maybe we'll just take our money back. How about that? Fund your own military, bro. The U.S.'s largest egg producer reported an over 700% profit increase last quarter. Another example of rampant corporate gouging at the root of inflation. The grand jury overseeing Trump's case in New York will break for a month, meaning any indictment won't come before late April. Matt's not back, though, yet. Not sure. Yeah. Interesting. Rolling Stone reports that Trump is working on crafting a campaign platform surrounding illegal military strikes in Mexico. Donald the Dove, said Maureen Dowd in 2016. A Bush-appointed federal judge in Texas has blocked the ACA's mandate that health insurers cover preventative care, including cancer screenings and notably PrEP, which helps prophylactically combat HIV. The reasonings were explicitly homophobic, and the group backing the plaintiffs is a Stephen Miller group. The Biden administration opened bidding on drilling in the Gulf of Mexico yesterday. Turkey is set to approve Finland's NATO membership today. 9 New York members of Congress, including Jamal Bowman and AOC, have signed a letter pressing Hochul to support the climate bill going through New York State's government. It was crafted by many of the left-leaning members in New York State. Heavily right-wing Kentucky legislature votes to override Democratic Governor Andy Beshear's veto of an anti-trans bill. This also comes as West Virginia passes a bill banning gender-affirming care for minors. And lastly, Ron DeSantis signs into law a huge school voucher expansion. Privatization is the goal of all of these attacks on our schools. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. Welcome. Another Matt writes in, it would be amazing if Matt is on the Gwyneth Paltrow case. Matt's sitting on the grand jury to determine who skied into who, and who lost a full day of skiing and who did not.
I talked to him yesterday for a sec over the phone. I was hoping he was going to be like, yeah, you know, I'm getting they were flying me to Park City, Utah for some reason. Not sure why, but can't really say much else.
Yeah, right. Can't give you the specifics of the case, but for some reason, I'm desperately needed out west. That would be hilarious. Good I am, another Matt. Well, I just also want to note that thing about DeSantis there. I mean, all of these attacks on education, whether they be kind of secondary or not necessarily front-facing, I mean, you have to realize that these attacks on public education from the right, from DeSantis's book bans and the general anti-critical race theory panic, the anti-trans panic, the grooming panic, the refusal to do anything about guns, school shootings, the critique of teachers' unions, the relentless attack on them, particularly with COVID. It all boils down to a desire to privatize our public school system, and to undercut it as an institution. And so the school voucher program in Florida, that's a natural progression of that. But let's turn now to the hearings yesterday, which I know Sam gleefully covered, and I'm going to bring a little bit more of a frustrating element to it because this clip is of Mitt Romney. But Howard Schultz just completely filleted, incredibly so, in front of the Senate committee yesterday, because Bernie Sanders, it's the labor committee, right? I mean, he heads that
the health
committee.
Committee, which is health education, labor, pensions.
Right, right. So that's quite convenient, and it's helpful that Bernie Sanders is such a long tenured member of the Senate that we can have him to head that kind of committee and get Howard Schultz to be dragged in front of the public and answer for his union busting. But some people, like Mitt Romney, don't want him to answer for his union busting. In fact, Mitt Romney really thinks that there's nothing wrong with what Howard Schultz has done because he's a, quote, job creator. This was the prelude to what Mitt Romney had to say in the midst of during that hearing.
I defer to Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Cassidy. I recognize at the outset there's some irony to a non-coffee drinking Mormon conservative defending a Democrat candidate for president in perhaps one of the most liberal companies in America. That being said, I also think it's somewhat rich that that you're being grilled by people who have never had the opportunity to create a single job, and yet they believe that they know better how to do so, and what's best for the American worker, and what's best for the American economy, what's best for growth. I also think it's rich to not recognize the extraordinary conflict of interest we have, which is our Democrat colleagues overwhelmingly get their campaign funds from unions, and therefore would like to find every possible way to extend unions, even if an enterprise feels that it's in their best interest to pursue a different course. Now, I know that there are a number of reasons. Can you pause it for a sec?
It's hilarious that he does not extend that same analysis to his Republican colleagues who get corporate donations, wealthy donations, many of which we don't even know about because we don't have any transparency laws on purpose in this country, from corporations, from the wealthy. That entire party is buoyed by corporate money, and that pales in comparison to union political donations. No, the Democratic Party is reluctantly beginning to welcome workers back into the party after expelling them for years and decades under a neoliberal consensus because there was just like the Reaganification of politics and the desire to appeal to those very campaign donors that exclusively fund the Republican Party. Now we're just beginning to crack the door open for unions to have at least a little bit more power in this country. It's laughable for him to even put it in the same universe as the corporate donations that the entire Republican Party lives on, and the Democratic Party also continues to unfortunately live on. But continue.
Like to find every possible way to extend unions, even if an enterprise feels that it's in their best interest to pursue a different course. Now, I know that there are a number of reasons why you might wish not to have union organization in your various enterprises. At the same time, I agree with Senator Cassidy and with your own comments, Mr. Schultz, which is that people have a legal right to form a union. There are some employers that are not good employers, and a union is necessary to protect the rights of those individuals, and that if any enterprise, including yours, has broken the law, that it should be held accountable for having done so. the same time, there are legitimate reasons why an enterprise might choose not to become unionized. I first would note that within your company, there are probably some stores that are union, some that are non-union. Do the non-union store employees get paid less than the union store employees?
The starting wage has been the same. The only difference is the benefits that we created in May. And my understanding under the law is that we were not allowed to provide those benefits to people who are organizing to join a union.
Yeah, that is a lie to a degree. Howard Schultz and Starbucks ended up proposing these kinds of benefits as a way to undercut mass unionization efforts across the country, because the appeal that the unions had to the workers was much more lucrative and better, and they were trying to give people carrots essentially to ensure that they didn't join a union. But you would have been much better off joining the union long term. There's so much there, but one of the most liberal companies in America, Howard Schultz describes it as. It's based on this old notion because, Bill Clinton had Howard Schultz at the White House. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, allergies, something like that. Howard Schultz at the White House. There was kind of like a liberal veneer branding about corporate responsibility that Starbucks really embodied that just is completely outdated in our current context and doesn't hold a lot of water. When he talked about job creators, bosses, billionaires like Howard Schultz, multi-millionaires like Mitt Romney, they're not social workers, they're not teachers, they're not firefighters, or they're not public servants, they're not even politicians. They're not there to maintain a societal good. The only reason they employ people is to enrich themselves. They attempt to limit employment to the point where there is as little as redundancy as possible, specifically in our current corporate climate, meaning as little as of employment as possible. As lean of a labor model. I mean, we just saw that biting Norfolk Southern in the ass when it came to the train derailment. From their perspective, that's the cost of doing business. But they want to have as little workers as possible, create as few jobs as possible so they can squeeze as many profits out of their company as they can. They don't have a duty to their employees. The duty that these bosses have are to their shareholders. It's their fiduciary duty by law for them to maximize shareholder value, not to create as many jobs as possible. Let's be clear about that. They have a mandate, and it's not to workers, it is to shareholders. And eventually, to themselves, because a lot of them own shares. Stock buybacks, that kind of thing. They're not job creators. They're job gatekeepers. And oftentimes, in Mitt Romney's case in particular as well, they're job killers. Old article from 2011 by Michael Barbaro from the New York Times, now the Daily guy, wrote about Mitt Romney in the midst of his presidential campaign. By the green-hued yardsticks of Wall Street, the 1990s buyout of an Illinois medical company by Mitt Romney's private equity firm was a spectacular success. Mr. Romney's company, Bain Capital, sent a team of 10 turnaround experts from Boston to ferret out waste, motivate executives, and study untapped markets. By the time the Harvard MBAs from Bain were finished, sales at the medical company Dade International had more than doubled. The business acquired two of its rivals, and Mr. Romney's firm collected $242 million, a return 8 times its investment. Whoa, that's a lot of job creation, right? But an examination of the Dade deal, which Mr. Romney approved and presided over, shows the unintended human costs, Barbaro, let's not, unintended, human costs and messy financial consequences behind the brand of capitalism that he practiced for 15 years. At Bain Capital's direction, Dade quadrupled the money it owed creditors and vendors. It took steps that propelled the business towards bankruptcy. And in waves of layoffs, it cut loose 1,700 workers in the United States, including Brian and Kristen Shoemaker, who lost their jobs at the plant in Westwood, Massachusetts. Staggered, Mr. Shoemaker wondered, how could the bean counters just come in here and say, hey, it's over? They interview some of the workers that lost their jobs. Bain and a small group of investors bought Dade in 1994 with mostly borrowed money, limiting their risk. They extracted cash from the company at almost every turn, paying themselves nearly $100 million in fees. First for buying the company, and then for helping to run it. Later, just after Mr. Romney stepped down from his role, Bain took $242 million out of the business in a transaction that, according to bankruptcy documents and several former Dade officials, weakened the company. Even some people who benefited from the payday and found it reasonable at the time now question it. Essentially, they pushed the company into that bankruptcy. On the campaign trail, Mitt Romney has taken a tough love approach to the economy, suggesting that the best remedy for the housing market was to allow foreclosures to hit the bottom. It was the same approach he took with Bain, as he explained in an interview to the New York Times in 2007 when asked about layoffs at the companies that he bought. Sometimes the medicine is a little bitter, he said, but it is necessary to save the life of a patient. The patient being Bain and all the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're making from this. And it goes on and on. I mean, Bain ended up helping this company, Dade, acquire a company called DuPont, part of a division in DuPont, a diagnostics division in 1996, and another medical testing company. For DuPont, they had a plant in Puerto Rico after Dade, under the direction of Bain Capital, acquired DuPont. It closed its plant in Puerto Rico. All but a few of its nearly 300 workers were laid off. Arsenio Munez Rosado, a 51-year-old father who has spent 23 years at the plant, started out as a groundskeeper, sank into a debilitating depression. Still jobless 6 months after he was let go, he tried to commit suicide with a full bottle of Xanax pills. It was the first of several attempts. Job creators. Hilarious. Hilarious that these guys probably have some semblance of internalized guilt. I mean, a lot of them are sociopaths. I totally understand that, but they still at least know how they come off. So they have to rebrand being a capitalist. We're a job creator. We're a job creator, baby. In reality, they're job killers. They're job slashers. They are layoff kings that enrich themselves on the backs of workers and then pretend they're being benevolent. They're not necessary for society. If we cared about job creation, we would have a jobs guarantee. We would have a federal jobs guarantee where there wasn't a profit motive to keep people employed. The only reason they create jobs to the minimal amount that they have to, is so that they can get rich. When it gets in the way of their profits, they cut jobs. And Mitt Romney is exactly the exact kind of person that embodies that mindset. And this is exactly what the Republican Party is and always has been. Laundering lies for the most powerful in the world, getting rich off of people and workers, and then branding themselves as pro-worker and aesthetic. But Mitt Romney, Mr. Car Elevator, can't even do that. Hilarious. I hope him and Howard Schultz had a drink after that. Brothers in arms. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Matthew Connolly. back, and we are joined now by Matthew Connolly, professor of international and global history at Columbia University, principal investigator at History Lab, and author of the book, The Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Emma.
Of course. So, classified documents, they've been in the news a lot lately, that phrase. Given Donald Trump's propensity to hoard them for God knows what reason, and then even more problematically, refusing to return them. But we also then learn, okay, Biden has some laying around. So does Mike Pence. And it begs the question, right? How many damn documents are classified and why?
Well, the short answer is nobody knows. There's an office in the government that you've probably never heard of. Their job is to tell the rest of us, how many times officials are classifying information. But 5 years ago, they gave up and they said they can no longer even guesstimate, how many times every year officials are classifying this or that record. But the last time they tried, it was over 50 million times a year. So yeah, there's just tons of this stuff lying all over the place.
And it just seems like there's very little oversight in that process. What classifies as a classified document, what doesn't? I mean, how much of this is essentially, in your opinion, just a best practice for government officials to get away with whatever they want to get away with? And it's become so widespread that there isn't even a thought associated with classifying anything anymore.
Yeah, well, there are rules. These are the rules that presidents issue. They issue executive orders. And according to these rules, they're supposed to only classify information when it can otherwise endanger national security. But as you can well imagine, when they're doing this like tens of millions of times every year, and when there are literally millions of people who have security clearances, you can imagine that all kinds of people are classifying information for their own secret reasons. But, the thing that really bothers me, about, when Trump walked off with boxes and boxes of these documents, it's really about not so much national security, it's about democratic accountability. Because the whole point of preserving those kinds of materials and making sure they're kept in the National Archives so that the rest of us eventually get to see them is so that we can hold our leaders to account. So if they're walking off with these records or destroying them, it means that even the court of history is closed.
Yeah. And from your perspective, I know that you've been working really hard to get some more sunlight on these kinds of things. I mean, just from a researching perspective, what has that process been like, trying to, through FOIA requests and other means, get a handle on just the scope of these classified documents?
Yeah, so what my colleagues and I have been doing at Columbia is that we've been trying to aggregate, the millions of documents that have been declassified, and then we're using data science tools to figure out what's missing. And so, when, at some point in the future, one would hope you could begin looking back, at what documents have been preserved, say, from the Trump years, you can begin to see, what's missing, right? Because sometimes the missing documents, they leave suspicious patterns. And so, the book I wrote, The Declassification Engine, you can see, for example, during the time that Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State, there are periods, whole weeks, where almost no diplomatic cables are accessible. Almost none of them have been preserved. And the people at the National Archives will tell you that they never got an explanation from the State Department as to why that part of our national history is just gone.
I want to get to that period of history for sure, because World War II and then the Cold War is really, as you write, when this seismic shift begins to happen. But let's just back up really to the creation of the United States Constitutional Convention. What were the systems, or lack thereof? What was the collective mindset, if there was any, about classification and secrecy at the founding of the country? And you write about guys like Jefferson and Jackson as well.
Yeah. So, if you read the Constitution, you find that there's actually only one place where they explicitly allow for our government keeping information from us. And interestingly, it's not the executive branch. It's really only Congress, in the Constitution, that has a recognized authority, to at least keep some of its deliberations secret. But at the same time, in the Federalist Papers, some of the people you just mentioned, people like Hamilton, Madison, and so on, they also said that the president was going to have to at sometimes act with secrecy and dispatch, right? And I think most Americans, flash forward a couple hundred years, we would recognize that there are things, whether they're about international negotiations or secret military technology, there are times and places when it's important that our elected leaders do have the power, to keep at least some information for some time, secret from us and especially from our enemies. But what's happened in the meantime is that, this complex that began in the Second World War, it just grew and grew to the point where it's grown completely out of control, to the point where even presidents can no longer keep it under wraps.
Right. And I mean, talk a bit about the how when secrets were kept earlier on, it was more related to keeping information out of the hands of essentially non-white men. Like you talk about how in particular this related to the treatment of indigenous Americans or Black Americans early on in our country's history.
Yeah, so for the first 150 years of our history, the U.S. was really an outlier. We didn't have a central intelligence agency. We didn't have like a black chamber to intercept communications and decode them as like every other even middling power did at the time. And so, in that way, the U.S. was an outlier and actually at the forefront, right, in advancing principles of democratic government and accountability. But of course, as we also know, at the time, for much of this time, the only people who really were free of state surveillance were white male property owners, and others, especially Black people and women too, were often excluded, even from learning how to read, even having the rudiments, to know what the government was doing. And without that, of course, you can't keep anyone accountable. And so, part of the story, of America, I would say, is that over this period of time, gradually, the scope of who, counted as citizens and had equal, liberties to hold their leaders to account, that gradually expanded over time. But when you get to, the point of World War II, when this new thing, at least new in American history, this apparatus, for keeping a growing amount of information from the American people, when you look at like who it was who first created this system and how they policed its boundaries, what you find is it was basically white men who protected, this last part of our government and made certain that it was very difficult for anybody who wasn't like them, to get access to it. And the way they did that was through things like security clearances and deciding who had a need to know, top secrets about our government.
Yeah, it's a gradual kind of building up of like certain gatekeeping elements that now we've just completely naturalized. But when it gets starts to go on steroids, I guess, is, as you write, during World War II, when transparency really kind of became a bygone era, particularly for the federal government.
Yeah, and in the years that followed, some people now I think might be surprised, like gender non-conforming people, large numbers of them were able to work in the federal government. Many of them had responsible positions, like in the State Department, for example. And actually, it was after World War II that these people were systematically like hunted down and fired. Right. I mean, so there was actually a crackdown where even the limited diversity that was possible at that time was greatly narrowed. Now, right up to the present day, it's notorious, that the national security state, when we're talking, for example, about the Pentagon or our 18 different intelligence agencies, it's notorious that, especially at the most senior level, these are the least diverse parts of our government. And it's still the case, that when trying to get security clearances, even to be qualified to do the kind of work, the secret work that they do, things like a bad credit rating, any kind of history of an arrest, any admission, of using illicit drugs.
Smoking pot, you still can't get a security clearance. It's ridiculous.
There are all kinds of like structural reasons why, large parts of the American society is more or less excluded.
Yeah.
From even participating in working in national security.
Yeah, that was one of my sweet mom's reaction when I got arrested for smoking weed this one time. She's like, "You can't work in the government now." I'm like, "I don't know if I wanted to." So there's that. There's that.
The CIA may not be right for you, Emma.
I don't think so. But it just like that is so interesting too, especially given like this right-wing campaign right now to say that wokeness is invading the CIA, which is just hilarious. It's a PR exercise for them to bring more kinds of people in because it's important for these institutions to evolve with changing times so that they can maintain the equilibrium that allows them to say classify everything all the time.
Yeah, that's the complaint. You actually have people who have been at the CIA for decades, like publicly, writing articles saying that, wokeness is taking over the CIA and it's making it impossible for us to do our mission. But what you find, like as I did, my colleague and I, Pat Irvin, we've been doing research. We're going to be writing up a report what we found in interviewing people, who have worked in government, in many cases, Black people, women, et cetera, to talk about their experiences. And what they'll say is that, political correctness, DEI sessions, like do nothing for them, right? What really matters in terms of whether, the intelligence community of the Pentagon at its leadership ranks, whether it resembles the rest of America, what matters, of course, is whether people have opportunities to advance, like whether they get mentored and supported. But unfortunately, like when you go back and you look at how, all this began and the fact that no one like that ever had an opportunity when we're talking about the 1950s and 60s and 70s, there's a path dependence, that plays out over decades, where the people hired then who are in senior positions now, they came of age at a time in which, these, for example, the FBI didn't have a single woman agent.
Yeah.
Not one Black person was allowed to be an FBI agent. Only the people who were J. Edgar Hoover's personal servants, qualified as agents if you were
and
Black.
Eventually informants, right? I mean, and eventually informants for that purpose. Only when they became useful to infiltrating civil rights groups, then and then we can have some Black people in our institution.
And the FBI, these are the gatekeepers of the national security state. Like typically, if you want to get a security clearance, these are the people who are going to interview you, your friends, your relatives, your employers, et cetera. So just think what that means. In the FBI, that kind of institutional culture is what's guarding the gates and deciding who gets to make national security policy in the U.S.
Right. Well, then let's turn to the Cold War, because that is, of course, when you can trace a lot of the systemic issues with our national security state to, and where the complete, I would call it institutional opacity. I don't even never know how to. Yeah, sure. Where that becomes like incredibly institutional. You kind of trace this back to the Manhattan Project in particular. Take us through that period of history when secrecy becomes so congealed in the federal government.
Yeah, so the Manhattan Project, it was like the prototype, of what a special access program would be. And, now we have thousands of these. Even the government can't even tell us like how many special access programs there are. But the Manhattan Project was the first of its kind. And what that means basically is that the fact itself, the fact the United States was developing atomic weapons was classified as top secret. And the only people allowed to know that, were people who were said to have a need to know. That didn't include, for example, the Vice President of the United States, like Harry Truman himself, wasn't allowed to know about the atomic bomb project until Roosevelt died and he became president. And so, the Manhattan Project like took things to new extremes, but it also like developed a whole system where you have like levels of secrecy, top secret, secret, confidential, and so on. And you also had these silos, these special access programs where even people with top secret clearances wouldn't necessarily be allowed to know what was happening in these other programs. So this is in part, a Cold War story. It's one that begins during the Second World War, begins at Pearl Harbor, I would say. But it's not only about the Cold War. Because when you actually look back and you get access, for example, to like top secret war plans, what you find is that in the 1960s, the Pentagon was running wargaming scenarios where they were imagining race war in the United States, right? So it wasn't only about the Soviet Union. Like they had all kinds of anxieties that they played out in these top secret wargaming scenario exercises, right? So there's a lot of history here that still is incredibly relevant, to some of the things we're confronting today.
Well, I mean, the national security state attempted to make that connection by like some of these civil rights groups. Hey, they may be communists, in the subversives in the U.S., and then that just explodes everything, of course. And I'm not sure. There's so much we don't know, so I might ask you to speculate a little here. Mm-hmm. But we've talked on this program about the JFK assassination many times. There are new questions, thankfully, I think, being brought about the Martin Luther King assassination and what authorities did or did not know, what their involvement was or was not. Mm-hmm. Like this entire period of the assassination of political leaders and civil rights leaders, it cannot be a coincidence that this is also a time where the national security state it's feeling itself and knows we are the ultimate secret organization on the planet. And we still don't have the information that we need to actually cover that history accurately.
Yeah. I think, there are some who will never be satisfied, with the official explanations, whether it's about the MLK assassination or John F. Kennedy. And with good reason, because unfortunately, like for far too long, all too much of that history was covered up. And once we learn more, we find out, that in fact, the Pentagon, intelligence community, the CIA, they did undertake programs, right, where they were training people to become assassins. And they actually did have plans, to carry out assassinations, even when the United States, right? So some of this stuff, it sounds like Hollywood thrillers when we're talking about like Project MK Ultra, for example, or Project Northwoods. It's the kind of stuff where unless you show people the actual documents, they still won't believe you. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, our government really did, train assassins, and they really did have plans to carry out assassinations within the United States. For example, to provide a pretext for the invasion of Cuba, for example. So there are good reasons why people have these kinds of suspicions. My own sense of it, though, is that at the end of the day, as scandalous as these things are, and as much as we still need to learn, a lot of what they classify as top secret is actually not that interesting. I mean, to me, that's a whole other aspect of this.
Well, maybe the most interesting stuff is not left on a paper trail is part of it, probably, right? But there's a reason Trump just didn't release those additional JFK records when they were supposed to be calendar-wise released, right? What was that, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah. Well, there are parts, of the government that will never agree to the release of anything that they call, sources and methods, right? So like to take an example, I think it's almost certainly the case, the National Security Agency was using all of its capabilities, to intercept communications, to decode them. Certainly in the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination. I'm sure the CIA was using all of its assets, as much as it could all around the world to learn more about it. They're not going to want to tell us, even about 1963, technology for decryption. They're not going to want to tell us about the identities of covert assets, even though it's 60 years later. They'll say things, for example, that, the fact that they were working for the United States is something that could still endanger their children or even their grandchildren, right? So there are things, I could well imagine that these agencies could, according to their own logic anyway, still want to keep secret all this time. And they're all also, and again, I'm going to push the boring part. Apparently, a lot of the redactions in these records, there are things like CIA file numbers. Like, right. Believe it or not, like for some reason, the CIA feels like their filing system is something where even if the individual numbers of individual files are disclosed, somehow it's going to blow up the United States. So sometimes, the kind of secrecy we're talking about, it could be very sinister, but sometimes it could be kind of banal.
Well, it's also just the paranoia that a bloated kind of militaristic empire engenders, right? Where we've gotten so large, so wealthy, so imperialistic in a modern sense that there becomes like an internal paranoia that you kind of that you see within some of these institutions. I would guess that trickles down. Mm-hmm. To some of the agents, workers there, and also just how bipartisan this is, this commitment to secrecy. You rightly point out that under the Obama administration, there were more prosecutions under the Espionage Act than in many more times over than in the previous administrations before it. I think, but a lot of us, like liberals, me at the time, getting excited about Obama, people might not know that, because that kind of secrecy and underhandedness is often associated with the Bush administration, but it's bipartisan here.
Yeah, well, Obama promised the most transparent administration in history, but under his watch, the number of times officials classified information reached an all-time high. It was 94 million times in 2012. That's 3 times every second, right? And like you said, like more people were prosecuted under the Espionage Act for leaking information to journalists than all previous administrations combined. And so as much as presidents like come in, promising greater transparency and accountability, presidents find in secrecy a kind of sovereign power. They get to decide what the rest of us are allowed to know, when they could say it's protected because of national security. And Congress and the courts have not provided any effective check on this otherwise unlimited power, right? And so when you use the word imperial, I think it's the right word, because, what is empire but ruling over other people without having to answer to them, right? So, of course, this is even more the case, when the U.S. is running covert operations around the world, right? When we're carrying out a targeted killing program where hundreds, ultimately thousands of people are being killed under secret circumstances and according to president's secret orders. But, it matters also, when the American people aren't even allowed to know about the surveillance of the American public, because if the American people can't hold our leaders to account, then ultimately who can?
Yeah, it's undemocratic is really what it comes down to. The breadth of the holding of these kinds of secrets and what is determined to be secretive. Before I let you go, I just wanted to touch on how that connects to the Edward Snowden revelations, the continued attempts to extradite Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, etc. Like, what do you think that crackdown on those that kind of attempt at transparency says about where we are right now, even in 2023, with government secrets?
Yeah. So however you feel about Julian Assange, and WikiLeaks, if he is successfully prosecuted and imprisoned under the Espionage Act, for putting information out, that the United States government, deemed to be classified, then there are many, many other journalists, right, and activists who could also be prosecuted and imprisoned for doing the very same thing. So it's an incredibly important case. And it's not, coincidental that the Trump administration, made sure that among the things that he was being indicted for, made certain that it included the Espionage Act, because there are people in government who would love to create this precedent. Never before has the Espionage Act been used to lock up journalists just for providing information, to the people. And so however you feel about Julian Assange, you really have to pay very close attention to what's going to happen in this case, because the consequences could be incredibly important.
Actual last question, because I found it notable how you steer away from calling this information hole the deep state. You call it the dark state. That was intentional, I imagine, on your part to kind of reframe it. What was your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it's because when people use the term the deep state, and this is certainly the case with Donald Trump and his supporters, what they're describing are people inside government, accountable to no one, who are carrying out machinations in defiance, of our elected leaders. I wish it was that simple. But unfortunately, the love of secrecy goes all the way to the top, right? So ultimately, like, if presidents wanted to do something about this, they could. But every president, including Donald Trump, loves secrets, right? Trump is the only president who never issued an executive order to change our secrecy system, even a little. He was perfectly happy to continue using the same executive order that Obama used, right? So that's why I call it the dark state, because it's not just something that happens deep inside our government. It's something that's directed and permitted from the very highest levels. And it's also something that's covered up some of the darkest chapters in our history.
Matthew Connolly, professor of international and global history at Columbia University, author of The Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets. Thanks so much, Matthew. Really appreciate the conversation and your time today, and we'll put a link to your book in the description wherever you're listening or viewing this.
Thank you, Emma. Great to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Orly Noy. We are back, and we are joined now by Orly Noy, editor at Local Call, chair of B'Tselem, I hope I got that right, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, and her latest piece in 972 magazine, which is a favorite of ours here, is called Do Israeli Protesters Really Want Democracy? Orly, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, where are you headquartered right now? Are you in Jerusalem?
I am.
Yes. So you're in the midst of these over a dozen weeks of protests in Israel. They've been temporarily successful for the aims that they've set out, right? Netanyahu has delayed his judicial overhaul after a ton of pressure. But I'm just fascinated because at issue, according to the protesters, is democracy, right?
Yeah.
But that democracy doesn't exist in Israel, right? So that's the problem I have with the framing. And I, from your piece, I feel like we have I can garner that you share that opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, for so many years, Israelis were left to believe, both by their governments and also, it should be said, by the international community, that you can be considered as a democracy and maintain a brutal occupation, that you can be considered as a democracy and actually practice an apartheid regime. And so Israelis really didn't have any reason not to understand democracy in such a damaged way that, as far as it's functioning fine in protecting the basic rights of the Jewish citizens, then it's a perfect democratic country, and it's received as such by the international community. But no, you're absolutely right. Israel has not been a democracy for decades, and some would even argue it never was a real functioning democracy.
I mean, it can't be. It cannot. Let's just speak plainly. Like a settler colonial government that excludes how many occupied or how many Palestinians, people living in the occupied territory, are unable to participate in the Israeli democracy?
Well, let's look at the entire territory, actually, between the river and the sea, the entire territory under the Israeli regime, including the Palestinian citizens of Israel, which are also being discriminated against under the same apartheid logic. And in that entire territory, the Jewish population is actually the minority. So we do have, we were surpassed already demographically by the Palestinians in the entire territory under Israeli regime. So you have a full-fledged apartheid regime, which is being implemented in different ways. I mean, the face of the Israeli apartheid is different in Gaza, and it's different in the West Bank, and it's different in East Jerusalem, and it's different in inside the 48 lines, inside the Green Line. But one thing they all have in common, and that is to maintain in every means possible the supremacy of Jews over their Palestinian neighbors. In all of that territory. In Gaza, there is no presence of Jewish settlers, but it's still sieged by the same apartheid rationale.
Well, the premise, too, as well, of the protests in terms of making sure that the court system is not politicized to the degree that Netanyahu wants, is also a frustrating conceit from my perspective as well, because as we see in the West Bank, the escalation of the displacement of Palestinians from their ancestral homes, the seizure of that by settlers who, the right-wing government of Israel is backing, there has been very little to no recourse by the court system for decades for Palestinians, because they say, oh, well, you need a deed. Well, I don't have a deed. I've had this in my family for years. Well, too bad. Then it's this Israeli settler's home now. I mean, that is the system that this democracy is presiding over.
It's absolutely true. I mean, there is something incredibly worrying and alarming about the current attempt to completely empty the judicial system from any real substance. But at the same time, it should be mentioned that throughout the years, especially since 1967, but even before, towards the Israeli citizens, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Supreme Court gave little protection, very little protection to protect their rights, and actually legitimized every step that was taken by the Israeli establishment against Palestinians, the dispossession, the ethnic cleansing, the demolition of houses, the very, very frequent administrative detentions that can be renewed endlessly, and the courts legitimized all that. The state-nation law, the citizenship law that actually prevents Palestinian citizens of Israel to marry spouses from the occupied territories and live together as a family unit. And the list goes on and on.
Yes. And that is the danger for me from the outside looking in of calling these pro-democracy protests. Because, as you say, that makes the actions before this attempt to take over the court system, like that puts them under the umbrella of democracy when in fact it is the exact opposite. And that's my fear, really, of some of the reaction to the protests internationally. I mean, Biden is condemning it, and he's going in a bit of a back and forth with Netanyahu. But the reality is that the United States is not going to cut its aid based on this. And even if it does, the incentive that creates is not to stop the apartheid. It's to maintain the existing court system, which already upholds the apartheid.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It is very, very unfortunate that the international community, headed by the United States, for such a long time gave Israel the green line to just, deepen, continue, not just maintaining, but deepening the occupation and the apartheid regime by calling it or presenting it as a symmetrical conflict that should be. It's not a conflict, and it's certainly not symmetrical. It's a brutal violation of the Palestinians' most basic rights. And, we are right now in Israel at a very significant moment, I think, that makes it possible, or requires, I think, to hold a conversation about the most basic fabrics of our socio-political life. Societies don't often get that chance. But right now we've been given a chance to really have an open conversation, a discourse about what it is, that democracy that we are calling out in the streets right now. What does it mean? Is it just a procedural democracy, just the envelope, the construction, or do we want to say something about the substance that fills that envelope? What is the substance of the democracy that we are demanding now? And this conversation, sadly enough, is not happening, or at least not happening enough in the Israeli society yet.
Yes. I mean, and I've been making this point for the past few weeks, talking about this. Fascism for thee and not for me is unsustainable. So now it turns on Israeli moderates, secular Jews within Israel, and but cutting out the ills that population faces insufficient. I mean, we saw this even with, and you write about this in your piece, the Balfour protests 3 years ago. Netanyahu getting ousted then. Well, now he's back in power. I mean, so that kind of shallow way of addressing the deep, deep undemocratic roots in this country right now is wildly insufficient.
Exactly, not just from a moral stand, but also from a strategic stand. Because what Balfour proved is that it's not enough to know what you do not want. You need to know what it is that you want and fight for that as well. Because what brought people together in the Balfour protest was knowing that they do not want Netanyahu. So fine, they got rid of Netanyahu, and we got the so-called government of change, where a very strange coalition that brought together Meretz from the Zionist left, and hawkish right-wingers such as Bennett and Lieberman. And what we should what we should remember is that government actually dissolved itself in order to protect the apartheid laws in the West Bank. So when we are looking at what's happening in the Israeli political sphere today, and if you listen to the Israeli discourse, you almost get a sense that some unidentified object from heaven just hit the wonderful Israeli democracy and shifted it from its course. That's not what happened. It was an inevitable outcome of a system that is built on notions of injustice and supremacy. And if we will not deal with those shortcomings today, we are bound to repeat and to go back to exactly where we are standing today.
Lastly, I mean, what's your sense of the composition of the protesters in the streets? I mean, record-breaking, millions, right? But then I see online, like anyone's carrying a Palestinian flag, it gets snatched from them. So I have no sense here in the United States what if there is some, like, what percentage of pro-Palestinian sentiment there is in the protest, but from the outside it seems to return to like the tenor of our conversation today, which is just, it's wildly insufficient, that amount of representation in what we're talking about right now.
Absolutely. And even before we speak about the pro-Palestinians, we should ask, where are the Palestinians?
Yes.
Like, you don't see them. You don't see the Palestinian citizens, despite the fact that they are going to be the first and the most exposed communities to get hit and hurt by the reforms or the judicial coup that this government is promoting. So we really should ask ourselves, why is it that the Palestinian citizens do not come to these massive demonstrations? And the answer is very clear. It's because except for the anti-occupation bloc that you can find in the demonstrations, but they are quite small and quite restricted, the mass demonstrations are very militaristic in their terminology, are extremely nationalist in their practices. You all saw the masses, the seas of Israeli flags and the Declaration of Independence, and you can see it in the figures heading this protest, and the speakers. I don't think that there is a single ex-general left that has not spoken in those demonstrations yet. So maybe tactically, on the tactical level, it worked, and Netanyahu is not canceling anything, of course, he's just buying time. But on the strategic level, that type of protest just broadened the gap already existing between the Jewish and the Palestinian citizens, and without narrowing or closing that gap, a true struggle for a real democracy can never happen in Israel.
Orly Noy, editor at Local Call, chair of B'Tselem, is the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, and you can read her latest piece in 972 magazine, which we will put in the link below in the description of the podcast and the show here. Thank you so much, Orly. I really appreciate it. I am getting frustrated by seeing some of these like wide declarations of how important these protests are, when for me it's like we're talking about everything but what the actual issue is. And so that's my frustration.
And I completely share your frustration, and if I can just add one sentence,
sure.
To your audience, be active wherever you are. Put pressure on your representatives in the Senate, in the Congress. This is not helping the Israeli society, giving Israel the green light to go on with apartheid and occupation is not only immoral, it's not helping us, the Israeli society, either. And, there's a saying, friends don't let friends drive drunk. I think we have drunk people behind the wheel. So if you're a real friend, you will take the wheel from them.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for your work within Israel as well, because I can't imagine what the pressure is like there to kind of cease with your efforts. So great appreciation. Thank you, Orly Noy. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program, head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs. But first, check out Left Reckoning. Do you know, Bradley, who was on Left Reckoning on Tuesday?
I don't know if this was the most recent episode, but they did have Daniel Bessner on recently.
They did.
To discuss his piece on fascism in the New Republic.
Okay.
Well, and
you should always be checking out Left Reckoning.
Yeah, but
youtube.com/Left
Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning for the post game. Check it out there.
Yes. And for myself and Bradley, ESPN, we spoke at length about the Lamar Jackson contract negotiations. There are a lot of people who are saying like Lamar's taking some sort of stand with owners. I think that's misguided. And we break that down, as well as the anti-LGBTQ push within the NHL right now. Naturally, why the World Baseball Classic is important to the sport. And hey, opening day today, baby. So baseball's hitting off today. Much to discuss over on youtube.com/ESVN show. With that, do we have Brandon and Binder soon? We have Brandon soon, but not on the screen quite yet. I'll read some IMs here. Isaac Mayon Cox said, okay. Wait till you hear the IM. Having a bad hair day, Emma? I mean, man, you are just whoever you are. What a gem you are. Thank you. And I did not think I was having a bad hair day until I looked a little bit of strays. A few strays. It's all good, though. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm a lot better now.
Yeah, right? I fixed it. What's up? How are you?
Well, I'm having a great hair day. I love my whole, like, thing that I have going on. I'm going to get it cut soon, but I love the, like, anarchy that the curls represent.
Right. You just never know which way it's going to go on a given day. It's like it provides spice for your life, right?
I have a lot of fun playing with my own hair. Like, as a people, we can't allow white people to do it. But, generally speaking, I'll just sit here and just like pat it all day.
I mean, you're teasing those white people then.
Just by being alive. Yeah.
Right. See what I can do and you can't do. What's happening over on the discourse?
Besides touching our hair and saying the N-word, lots of stuff. We should have we should have a lot of stuff going on this weekend. Had a few big personal things in the cooking that panned out, so now we have a lot more time to record, and I hope to rejuvenate our fans with a level of content that they are, I'm gonna be honest with you, not prepared for.
Okay, gotcha.
That was vague, but yeah, we'll have an episode out this weekend.
Check out yes, the discourse. People are saying that there's an echo with Brandon's mic, so we're fixing it. Okay, there we go. It's fixed.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? I don't hear an echo, so.
Sounds good to me, but Bradley says it's fixed, so we are, I think we're good. All good? Yeah. All right, we don't have Binder yet, but we got to head into the fun half and we'll see him there. Check out Doomed, check out Scam Economy. Again, the number is 646-257-3920. See you there. Bye-bye.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back.
back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them.
Things I do for the bigger game plan.
By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back. Not quite yet with Matt Binder, but soon enough. He's having some tech issues. Let's hope he can get that figured out. Here, let me just give myself a little more headroom. Bingo bango. God, I'm becoming Sam. Anyway, Sam's Clogged Toilet says, thanks to all Fave Fun Half crew. Hope you're well. Well, thank you. Kowalski from Nebraska. Howdy, EmMajority Report. Emma, I have sent a gift box to the MR office as a part of Operation Left is Mysterious. Should be there tomorrow. Ooh! Brandon has refused to give me his address, so his is going to the studio as well. No worries, I packed extra food and water in his box. Binder's, yours is going to the mansion in the Hamptons. Should arrive tomorrow. Enjoy.
I don't know if I've refused to give you my address. I don't know if it's been requested from me.
No. Wait. Oh, okay. You froze for 1 second. Jesus, Ghost in the Machine today.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, just for 1 second. But I just it's all ironing itself out.
It's all the energy in the air. It's all the experience that we're going to deliver. It's causing the technology to shudder.
The immersive leftist experience. That's what we provide for people.
We got to start doing these in the metaverse. We gotta jump on the trend before it's fully over.
10K per ticket. That's how we actually cash in. Adel says, Emma, you and Katie Halper are the best when it comes to Israel coverage. You guys bring a complete picture when it comes to Palestinian suffering. Hollywood liberals should be made to watch your coverage. Well, I don't know just about Hollywood liberals, but other people, right-wingers, generally, I understand that. It just, it's like... Just be careful a little bit with the framing. But yes, I mean, I don't understand. this is one of these issues where I feel like I'm screaming into the void and nothing changes. And there's an entire institution of people that choose to be okay with systemic apartheid, the fact that Palestinians in the occupied territories don't have access to clean water, 90% of them, and more. Like, it's incredibly frustrating. Okay, we have Binder, though. Hey, Binder, are you here?
I am. All
right,
good
good.
now. I had some tech issues, but they are fixed.
Awesome. So what's happening over on Doomed and Scam Economy?
Yeah, sure. Over on Scam Economy, the episode with Jackie Sawicki of that group that's basically an anti-crypto mining group. She lives in a small rural Texas town, and one of the biggest Bitcoin miners came in and basically didn't uphold what they said they would, and took advantage of the locals and the local government. That's on, spoke to her for Scam Economy at scameconomy.com and at youtube.com/Matt Binder. And then on Doomed this past week, I spoke with Devin Burghardt of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights to talk about how the far right, led by Nick Fuentes, is trying to pivot and rebrand into what they call Christian futurism, which sort of doesn't really mesh. I mean, other than the fascist.
It sounds sinister. I'm gonna tell you right now. It definitely sounds sinister.
So basically, we get into the history of futurism and its ties to fascist Italy, and then how Nick Fuentes is trying to take it and capitulate into this sort of Christian futurism, which basically is like fascism, but with a Kanye West music video aesthetic. It's very bizarre.
Yeah. All right. Well, check that out. I'm fascinated. That was a good pitch. I'm going to check that out as well. All right, let's get into it here. Some fun clips that we have for you. Well, let's start here with the Chaya Raichik one, because I got a lot to say about this. Chaya Raichik, whatever. I don't particularly care to give her the respect of identifying her in the way that she wants to be identified, because she doesn't seem to do so for everybody else. The hate monger Chaya Raichik of Libs of TikTok is coming out with a book. Her picture book for children is called No More Secrets, The Candy Cavern, and it tells the story of Rose, a young lamb child whose teacher, Mr. Woolley, is insisting that all the kids in the school get sweets.
Post the school address.
Yeah. The kids get candy and cupcakes. They don't read or count, just candy and cupcakes, candy and cupcakes. The kids can't resist all of the sweets being provided to them by their teacher. And here she is reading very charismatically an excerpt from that book to a bunch of kids who don't seem to give a shit.
Here, I saved you a cupcake. He saved Rose a cupcake because he realized she didn't have any cupcakes at recess. Rose felt funny. Something didn't feel right. She said, I don't think my parents would want me to have so much cake. Maybe I can take the cupcake home and ask them? That's very reasonable, right? She'll take the cupcake home and she'll ask her mom and dad if she can eat it because she already had so much candy. No, howled Mr. Woolley. You're old enough to make your own decisions.
Okay.
I can't imagine why such a talent would fall for the down the right wing rabbit hole and become a right wing influencer. I mean, so many opportunities, I'm sure, were in front of her. A Hollywood career, lots of work as an audio book narrator. I can't imagine what made her flock to the right.
Well, the book itself seems very mid. It seems like, in the movie Elf, when they published a really bad children's book at first, and then they have to get Peter Dinklage to come in and write a good one. Like that's the level of book I'm getting from this. But also the delivery. I personally wouldn't have chosen to read or debut my children's book to a crowd of children as though I'm giving a presentation at a regional academic conference for my like senior undergraduate thesis. But that's just me. I would have probably just sat around in a library to have it done. This was very like lecture style.
It reminds
3 out of
me,
10.
And someone who's clearly not the greatest at public speaking, she just didn't want to bring any of the pizzazz that would confuse any of the children, like colorful costumes or something like that, that might make them think that this is an actually fun, child-focused event like Drag Queen Story Hour or something like that. This instead is just antisocial loser story hour brought to you by Chaya Raichik, who I gotta note, kind of interesting to me that she likens transitioning into your preferred gender to a sugary cupcake that you can't help but eat over and over and over.
What was that word she used in that one Fox clip? It was like we were watching this Fox Nation clip with her and Tucker, and it was like intoxicating or like enthralling, like the like transgenderism or gender ideology. Like she frames it as if it's like a intoxicant or like a.
I know she's a real case of that Freud would have a field day with, but
where are all the protesters for a right-wing freak story hour in the
I really didn't get the
outside
message.
this library?
Actually, the protest was from inside the library itself with the people working at the library. You saw what they did?
Yeah.
Before, okay, on Twitter, someone who was there posted photos from inside the library, and they asked when, and it was all trans flags, LGBT flags, all the LGBT books front and center, like shown. And they asked, "Oh, when did you put these displays up?" And this was on the day of the Chaya Raichik book reading. And they said, "Oh, yesterday." So, I mean, there was a protest, a quiet protest from the people working at that library, it seems.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh no, I was just thinking. I mean, the harshest criticism were coming from the crowd itself, and the dead silence that you heard from a trial of children.
Yeah, I mean it's first of all, I love the subterfuge and the context that you provided, Binder. But hey, the audience is the ultimate arbiter of this kind of stuff, right? And they did not seem to be as down as like the dancing kids I see at Drag Queen Story Hour.
Also, imagine you're a kid and this woman's coming in and reading her storybook, and she's like, "Wait, you're telling me I could either have more candy and more cake, or I have to go home and receive my parents' permission to eat more cake and more candy?" Like, this woman's lame.
Yeah,
this woman is a loser.
I know.
This is why they're banning all the other books, so that there's nothing else to compare it with. This is why they don't want you to have Dr. Seuss anymore. They just want you to only be allowed to read like this and like Matt Walsh's book about being a fairy. I didn't really get that one either. Their analogies are always really bad because they're always like misrepresenting what the right wing position is, and so it just comes across as like, a confused critique of capitalism, like mindless consumption. But like in their eyes, like, no, this is what CRT is.
Yeah, isn't that right? They're supposed to. I thought that they were all pro-consumption, right? That must confuse the children even more than whatever this convoluted narrative is supposed to convey. Like, I thought that I was supposed to take what I wanted in conservative ideology. And I mean, again, if you're trying to appeal to kids, in theory, so that they don't fall for Mr. Woolley's bid to get them to transition into another gender. But you're likening it to candy and cake. This is the opposite that it's supposed to, I don't know, messaging-wise, she just probably should have had an editor or 3.
Instead of Rose went home to her parents, and then they posted a video on TikTok saying, "This is where Mr. Woolley is located. It would be a real shame if something happened to him for giving cake to kids."
I remember when I was a kid, like we watched some cartoon in class that I wasn't allowed to watch at home, and I said something to the teacher like, "I don't know if I'm supposed to watch this. My parents don't let me watch it at home," and I got laughed at in the middle of class. And I learned my lesson. Don't be a loser. And I learned that in first grade. So that's what she's teaching to the kids.
Anti-trans authors have really fallen far since Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh yeah, I mean, at least that was a compelling narrative. Now we've got just some mixed metaphors that don't even make any fucking sense.
Just imagine though writing a children's book inspired by your anti-trans activism. Like, how sad is that? Like, that's what you want to teach your children. Not even pro something. Not even like, oh, sharing is caring and be a good person. Like, just very general. No, you want to base your entire, your entire thing, your entire who you are, your entire personality on anti-trans activism. What a sad life.
It's just sad. It's sad, and to produce this propaganda is also very sad, and because the quality of it is very low. Like, it's very low quality propaganda, and it's propaganda, and it's like self-realized propaganda because they're doing this because they think that that's what the other side is doing. Like they read books like I don't know what the hip kids book are, but they read books like The House on Mango Street, and they think it's like pro-immigration propaganda. Other people just go like, no, this is the lived experience of a group of people. This is a book that's teaching people it's okay to like your own hair. It's not propaganda. It's like education. And then they make their books, and it's like, no, this is just straight up propaganda. You're just trying to put like propaganda in the hands of like children. Like, and it's, I guess we're lucky they're not good at it. It's so much
cruder. Like, I mean, because the actual stuff that they're combating isn't real propaganda. It's actual writing. And this is just straight up trying to shove a square peg into a round hole to make a hateful narrative work.
They've never been good at metaphors. So children's books are going to be a hard genre to break into.
Yes.
Writing YA novels.
What are the characters' names? That's what I want to know. I bet it's like as on the nose as possible. You know what I mean?
Rose and Mr. Wooly, right?
Rose is the protagonist, and then Mr. Wooly is the teacher.
Is the evil teacher trying to give you cake and candy.
Film him! Film him giving out candy!
Mr. Wooly, okay.
I know. She could have done something with that, and she didn't. But
Brandon, I think you're so right about the idea, because like the thing about this being more propagandistic than like what they consider to be propaganda is that there's actually nothing like serialized or narrativized about this. Like the point, like the story of the book is the agenda that they want to carry out. Like, there's nothing else that they're talking about. There are no other details. It is only in service of the point that she's trying to make. Like The House on Mango Street wasn't like, oh, I like my hair, let's open the border. This is just so ham-fisted as opposed to anything that they would even consider to be propaganda, i.e. actual fucking literature.
Right.
Yeah, it's really, really blunt.
Let's turn to this other trans related story, because Matt actually sent this to us, and it's we're playing it because he in absentia for Matt. But Pat Robertson, you guys remember that cretin? Well, in 2013, this is 10 years ago, a viewer wrote in and asked him a question about someone in that viewer's workplace, a coworker of that viewer, who decided that they were going to transition into being female. And Pat Robertson answers this question, again, 10 years ago, 2013, in a way that would be completely unrecognizable to the conservative posture towards trans erasure right now. This is stunning, truly.
In the Bible. Go ahead.
This is David, who says, I work with two people who have decided that they are females. I know what the Bible says about homosexuality, but is it wrong to refer to them as females since they've had their gender status changed in the eyes of the law? Why would you have to refer to them as females?
I don't understand all that, but I think there are men who are in a woman's body. Mm-hmm. It's very rare, but it's true, or women that are in men's bodies, and they want a sex change, and that is a very permanent thing. Believe me, when you have certain body parts amputated, and you have shot up with various kinds of hormones,
press pause for a second.
Radical.
He said, believe me, in a way that you would say that when you have experienced that yourself.
Well, I think
what is he talking about?
I think we can. I think if we can believe anybody about the Bible and its interpretation, it's Pat Robertson, since he's been around since it was written.
Yeah.
But so I believe him on this one.
Look how old he looks 10 years ago.
Oh, it's
I was thinking that. Yeah.
I mean, him and Henry Kissinger and Dick Cheney. It's like, guys, God, what kind of blood are they drinking? But
let's continue. Right?
Yeah.
Well, the blood of Jesus Christ, of course.
Oh, naturally, yes.
Thing, believe me, when you have certain body parts amputated and you have shot up with various kinds of hormones, it's a radical procedure. I don't think there's any sin associated with that. I don't condemn somebody for doing that, but somebody who just says, "Well, I'm really a woman," I question the validity of that statement. But they say they're counted as female. You don't count somebody as female unless they really are, or male unless they really are.
In this instance, so this is a person who works with two people, so he doesn't really know their intentions or know their personal medical scenario.
It's not for you to decide or to judge. All right.
Okay, this is April who says,
Okay, so of course, not a perfect answer. Naturally, there's still a lot of hate and weird theocratic undertones that are going to be widespread in any 700 Club episode. But like the hatred, the fear, the demonization, it just shows how astroturf this entire movement is. Can you pull up that Media Matters graph that I sent, Bradley? Because
I just want to add, it's, you could probably also find some very anti-trans clips from Pat Robertson going back that same amount of time too. But the point here is that, it was dependent on what the particular story was or how he was feeling that day. There was no pre-written, you must, if you're a conservative, you're a right-winger, you must have this hardcore, hard line stance on trans people like there is today. Like I just said, Pat Robertson would have given you a different answer based on how he felt that day 10 years ago for whatever the specific story was. Today, he would have a very particular answer regardless of what day it was and regardless of what the specific story was, because the conservative movement has decided you must feel this specific way. You must be anti-trans if you're a conservative.
Yeah, I mean, it's the definition of a moral panic. And now that we have like these moral entrepreneurs on the internet who are like clout sharking based on this entirely, astroturfed, but still deeply rooted in our culture's misogyny, our culture's sexism, broadly speaking, this new thing that they can latch onto, it's clear that that's just become just a new metric by which to judge how far right or how hateful you can be. And it's transparent, but doesn't make it any less dangerous, which I think is like the disgusting part.
And the last part there where he says that it's not for me to judge or anyone to judge a viewer. I mean, like, honestly, that's where I think the country largely is or would be if there wasn't this astroturfed campaign on behalf of, honestly, right-wing electoral politics, right? Getting people activated on the local level. Your children are under existential threat. So go to your school board meeting, go and vote. And if politics are local, which is how the right really likes to strategize, then that person who's going to the school board meeting is much more likely to go to the polls and vote for a Republican, down ballot, organize, fundraise, all that kind of stuff. And then also the other part of it is, and let's pull this up here, anti-trans hatred is incredibly lucrative for right-wing media members. Like, this is from a 1-year rough period, 11-month period, and I know it's a little old for Media Matters, but I still thought that this was instructive. The Facebook interactions on trans-related posts by page ideology. And you just see, I mean, 60.1 million on right-leaning pages, 16.1 million on left-leaning, 18.6 million on what Media Matters designates as non-aligned pages. And it's just like, it's hatred and the obsession that it engenders from people who have some repressed stuff and also just are far right and have that in them. It's lucrative for guys like Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire, all those kinds of figures.
That's exactly true, right? And it also feels more so than in 2010 when the right wing was using, not 2010, back during the Bush years when they were using like gay marriage and other sorts of like LGBT or LG, not T, but LGB issues to like divide the country. That felt much more like, politician driven, like think tank driven. This one feels a lot more just like internet media and also entrenched Fox News media trying to come up with a new, again, fear-mongering campaign, new way to make money off of keeping people scared. And a lot of local, Republican politicians have just adopted it as their, as their mantra too, to get some of that money, to get some of that clout, to hop on what it seems to be a very lucrative financial opportunity, as demonstrated by a lot of these like online influencers. It's crazy how much of this seems to be being driven by like people online more so than like the everyday average, Republican, national politician. Now, local politicians are a whole different story. Right. They're like all, but like at least, they seem to be taking their cues from a lot of the more entrenched right wing figures in our media.
It's 100% true. And it is, I think, to add to your point, Brandon, Republicans tried to run on this in the midterms, and they just did not do well electorally. It did not hold. Like the thesis that I spoke about all politics being local, it wasn't enough for them to make the gains that they thought they were going to make, given Biden's unpopularity. The problem is just like the Republican Party is more unpopular, and what really is driving this, I think, is engagement. And the Daily Wire is a huge part of it. They have people now, like just commentators on their platform. Matt Walsh, most notably. Michael Knowles is trying to break into it, but even the hiring of Jordan Peterson on this beat. And it's not a coincidence that they hired Peterson as Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman, came out. They're seeing those numbers. It's a driver for engagement, this kind of hatred. And then it becomes a Frankenstein monster. So,
yeah, it makes money. It definitely, it definitely gets people to donate to your campaign. Whether or not it helps your campaign win, I think, is a different story. But a lot of people are just thinking about this politics thing as a way to launch their next like podcast. Now it seems, even Obama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. God, does he have a podcast now? I know Michelle Obama does.
He had like a limited series one with Bruce Springsteen, which sounds like, oh my God, just like rip my teeth out instead. It's like I would rather get tortured like James Bond at the end of Casino Royale than listen to like two 50-year-old like dad boomers just being like, remember how it was in the 80s?
If you actually are
Bruce is like 70, actually. Like they're old, those guys.
Yeah,
but if you're actually looking for insight, what goes through the mindset of somebody looking to a former president speaking on a podcast? It's just, there's no honesty that's going to come out in that ever. So it's just background noise?
I mean, people listen to the CIA podcast, so
who?
I mean, Obama keeps winning awards too for whatever various different entertainment things he comes out with. So I mean, it seems like all you really got to do is win the presidency, and then your entertainment career, whoosh, straight. Message to all the Ben Shapiros and Matt Walshes out there, the Michael Knowles.
Yeah.
If you want that career in entertainment, you don't become a right-wing politician. You become a basic neoliberal, win the presidency, and then boom, bada bing. There you go. You'll be winning Academy Awards and
all that good stuff.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has her show, right? She has like MTG Online or whatever it's called. I don't know.
Ted Cruz has his own podcast now too. So there's Josh Hawley with his wife, where they are very, very lacking in sexual chemistry. All that good stuff. I just can't imagine. It's like this kind of stuff just funds itself. It doesn't matter how many people are or not listening to it. It's just depressing when we're in this space and just get paid anything. So
there's a lot of money sloshing around the like right wing radio space.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Dennis Prager makes money.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's painful. All right, let's take a call here. Calling from a 415 area code. 415. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Spacco, the voice of the scam economy.
Oh,
That's true. Yes, Spacco, the voice of scam economy.
Hello, Spacco.
Hi. So glad that Matt is there today. I actually have just sent him a message last night saying Matt has been great at covering things starting from Gamergate, and he had on Alejandro Cabrillo talking about the social media attacks of people. And lately I've been trying to see about maybe perhaps the hospitals and the people that have been attacked by Tucker Carlson could file defamation suits now that we've learned all these things from Dominion. And the thing that I want to ask Matt for, and for people as well, is the problem that I see with social media attacks. I just spoke just this morning to Rebecca Jones. You may remember her as the person who had the correct dashboard for Governor DeSantis. You know her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so she was they came into her house, they attacked her. Well, she's being subject to a vicious, coordinated online attack on social media. And
you're talking about the woman who had the medical stuff, the info, and on
COVID.
She's turned out not to be such a great source of information. I'm not saying what they're doing to her is what Florida's doing to her is right, but it also doesn't seem like she's totally on the up and up either.
Well, I actually want to talk about the actual attacking part of it in terms of what to do with somebody who is being attacked from, multiple sides online via social media. And since we know about, what happened with the people from Kiwi Farms and how they went after, I wanted to see about the process of what are the way that people who can be attacked, and like right now she's being attacked on Twitter. What are the ways that there is some sort of mechanism to help these people when what we're not seeing is, criminally these attacks are ignored? And I wanted to see about looking at perhaps a coordinated case, like a civil conspiracy case, because this is big money behind it. It's from Governor DeSantis and his people, and they're coordinating it and working it massively throughout social media. And there is no organization that's funding and helping and saying, let's track down the people who are doing this and then see about suing them in civil cases. And I, want some suggestions for help on who would fund this and who would help somebody like this.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question for someone like Sam, who has good connections, honestly, with tort lawyers and people in Florida.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna write that down as a concept idea, and I'll get back to it after the show and think on it a bit more. Spacco,
great.
that sounds
this is
good.
something that I think is really important.
All right, I really appreciate it.
Maybe the lawyer who did the Alex Jones case. I'm sure he's around.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Magic Cue Ball. Barack Obama gets podcast awards for people who just miss his voice after 4 years of Trump. Pretty much. Lux.
It really is it really is amazing that this guy is so beloved, and he could have easily put that towards literally any sort of direct action or activism, a call to action. He would have had so much for whatever cause he went for, and he just decided not to do anything. Just sit back and throw out some podcasts and Netflix documentaries. It's stunning.
I think people made a lot of excuses for Barack Obama while he was president, up until the point he even left. Like every year it was like, okay, first term, he can't do what he wants to do because he's like because he has to get reelected. Second term, he's going to go buck wild. Okay, second term, he's not doing anything. That's because the Republicans are blocking everything. But once he gets out of office, you're going to really see what he thinks about these MFers. He's gonna go like ham on the establishment. He's gonna like break down all the barriers, tell you what was really going on behind the scenes. And I think the most damning thing about like who Barack Obama actually has always been is just how focused his post-presidential career has been on celebrity. Like he like more so than maybe even George W. Bush. Not to say that he was a better president. That would be terrible. It's
shockingly lazy.
But
I mean,
it's just like
yeah.
Barack Obama seems like he became president just to become a successful podcaster / like producer. Like that is what it seems like Barack Obama aspired to based on this. Like he wanted to be Jay-Z but couldn't rap. Or he wanted to be like Tyler Perry but couldn't produce anything of like that quality, which, that sounds crazy. And so now he just does that. He just uses all his clout to have conversations with people who he thinks is cool. Like he's like, Mark Maron or Eric Andre or something. It's bananas.
It's bizarre. Locke says, in the trans discussion you had, I think you need to differentiate between the general apolitical right and the activated right. While the anti-trans movement is led by commentators, the political decisions are coming from their base's desire. It's a nuanced, different power dynamic than what you described, since there are many, many Republicans that consider this the number one issue. The politicians have lost control. The media is chasing what the base wants, more radical right, and the base shifts right, so they keep chasing further extremes on trans issues. Fair enough. That's a good point. And probably should have added that caveat in our coverage of that clip, but thanks for writing in, Lux. Woke Smut Peddler says, hey y'all, loved your interview today. However, your guest on Thursday last week, Jacobin contributor Daniel Finn, left out a key point in his analysis on the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon and the proposed self-ID laws in Scotland. A very publicized story about a prison inmate who goes by the name Isla Bryson has been serving time in a men's prison for multiple rape convictions before recently self-identifying as a woman. The proposed gender self-ID laws in Scotland would have placed Isla in the woman's estate for the remainder of their sentence. This story was at the forefront of the debate over gender self-ID laws and drove a lot of public opinion to turn against it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel Isla should have been transferred to a woman's prison? Thanks, left his best. I don't know enough about it to say, but if that's Isla's gender identity, then yes. Number 13, I can't help but wonder how much Dave Chappelle's specials and his response to being criticized as being anti-trans, however long ago that was, can be considered a flashpoint in this wave of recent right-wing anti-trans behavior. It really does feel like his behavior really pushed the anti-trans sentiment into a new high, and the right sprang on it as a political wedge issue. I can't deny that he did not help at all.
I think there are a lot of comedians from the early 2000s that would still use gay as an insult if they were allowed to. Mm-hmm. I think that we've just been successful enough at shifting not to sort of flip away all the other stuff there, but a lot of people are stuck at the height of their career. Dave Chappelle is stuck at the height of his career, which was the Chappelle Show, early 2000s. I'm hanging out with Mos Def, same with Joe Rogan, and they just secretly missed the days that you could just be like, that's gay, meaning like stupid, and that mixes with that. A lot of people have that sentiment. PC culture, rebelling against woke stuff is still kind of rooted in like that kind of word policing, and it resonates with people. I know the previous reply was about the apolitical right. I think there's an apolitical right, or at least a political right who would consider themselves to be apolitical, but you capture a lot of them with this kind of rhetoric about like they're just trying to stop you from being a real man, or like they just want you to like accept that two men kissing isn't weird. And a lot of the general still people not being comfortable with like gayness in general is being funneled into the anti-trans movement as well. And that's something that it's
an easier wedge for them to kind of channel that homophobic tendency because they're more marginalized right now.
Yeah, that's why people who think that it's going to stop there need to like really consider how stupid that is, because it clearly isn't. But yeah, it's a way to start re-demonizing that entire group and get back to where we were in the early 2000s for at least people in the media, not realizing that there is an entire contingent of rabid right-wing, real heavy transphobe who's like aren't even going to stop with that. They're going to, they're just full genocide mongers.
Chibbles says, has Sam considered starting a Minecraft server to talk to Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan instead of on somebody's show? I've seen some vids where it works wonders for Biden, Trump, and Obama. That's an AI joke, gotta be, right? Okay, there we go.
Yes, people have been the one good funny use I've seen of AI are those video game videos where it's like it's stills, so it's not AI is not there yet where it's as accessible to create real-time video of Trump, Obama, and Biden talking while playing Minecraft, but it's stills of them playing Minecraft with really realistic AI voices of the three of them using like in-game Minecraft terminology and talking about screwing up each other's Minecraft creations and stuff. It's pretty good, actually.
I saw you quote tweeted that great Ben Collins tweet about how the AI panic is starting to feel like an advertisement. I just want to say this about Ben Collins. It's really cool that he's gotten big and he still has some really good takes and he's fairly mainstream. So that's like, rarer. And I appreciate that insight because I saw on Foreign Affairs, there was some article about how AI could really help the United States in diplomacy. And you click on the piece and it's written by the chief of staff for the CEO of Google, who I just Google really quickly. And he's heading some AI project within the company. And it's like, these are all just ads.
Right.
Machine learning has been.
No, go ahead.
Okay, machine learning and AI has been on the back end of a lot of websites for a long time, but what we're seeing now is like the appification of that technology. Now it's going to make a really good app. Now it can do a lot of stuff that like people can visually see is really cool, as opposed to just like predictive text and other stuff. And it's going to be really easy to commodify that kind of thing. And so people are excited by that. But anytime a company keeps trying to convince you just how realistic their photos of like fucking 8-fingered like pinup models are, it's like, come on. I remember back when like they were trying to convince us all that Facebook ads could trick you into doing anything. And it's like this is just a branding exercise for the company.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's like, listen, there was that petition that came out the other day of all these various tech figures, and some of them well-meaning, but a bunch of different tech figures calling for the FTC to like force OpenAI, the big AI company right now, and like other AI companies to pause what they're doing right now for the sake of humanity. They're worried about AI taking over the world and the nuclear problem with AI and all this. And you look at some of the names, Elon Musk signed his name to that. Since when, and a bunch of other tech founders and VCs are on that too. Since when do any of those guys give two shits about the harm their products cause for society? These are the very people whose entire motto is build fast and break stuff. They don't care about whatever they put out there if it's theirs. Elon Musk is pissed that he invested in OpenAI and then became disassociated with the company, and now they're blowing up big, and that's what pisses him off. This is a guy who put his dangerous self-driving cars on the road that have already killed people. He does not give one lick about what harm AI can cause for society. He wants the government or some agency to step in, mess with OpenAI shit, which honestly, I don't care about OpenAI. They're not a good company either. But he wants something to happen to OpenAI so then he could come along and start up his own AI company and catch up because he's so behind. He missed the boat on this one.
Yep. I mean, that's a good point about Elon.
Yeah.
Go on.
I don't know, like, if everyone's starting their own AI company, I'm like, to do what? Like, what is this AI? What are the AI you're building doing? Like, is it just, are you trying to make Skynet, or do you mean like it's going to have some sort of targeted purpose? Like, it's just clearly a lot of people who are interested in crypto 2 years ago, are now going to be interested in AI because we're a very tech interested but tech illiterate society, aka Elon Musk. And it's, it sounds good. This is like a future seeming thing. Like, it's fun. Crypto talks about like being the future with all of its bullshit, but I think AI and like the advancements you can like visually see with like art and all of the like the problematic elements in regards to copyright aside, like it looks like the future for some people, which is like a lot, we haven't had something like that since like the smartphone. So hopefully it doesn't end as badly.
It's the equivalent of the hoverboard in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So like you can sell that image. Now I'm not saying it's the equivalent, but it's like that kind of thing. It gets people gets VC money interested. It's like it's more like the lab created meat or the self-driving car. VCs are like, hey, and that's all they care about. I shouldn't do that.
But
it does have uses, but like
someone's gonna clip
no.
Yeah, that's the thing though. When Emma brought up the hoverboards, that made me think of this right away. And you just said it does have its uses. That's sort of like the disappointing thing about this one. Like crypto, we could shut down that hype, and because there's no utility in crypto, the whole thing needs to be thrown away. But with AI, that's the disappointing thing. Before the hype, I did see some cool things with AI. Nothing dangerous or world-changing, but some cool things with potential. Those voices I mentioned, the Biden, Trump, Obama games. That's funny stuff. That's a utility. It's entertaining. But these guys, these tech VCs and founders, are hyping it up to fill their own pockets or to potentially fill their own pockets, and they're going to destroy even the good stuff. Eventually. Yeah. I mean, it's too bad. And of course, I also don't want, I got some shit from the art world about my take. I said this the other day in response to what Ben Collins said about a lot of the criticism from these bigwigs and the founders and the VCs are all hype to push it. The art world was upset that I was downplaying their criticism, which I'm not at all, because their criticisms are legit. The people who I'm criticizing do not have legit criticism. The art world is legitimately worried that some of these like AI art projects are going to put them out of work. And that's a legit criticism. But that's not in the same boat as this. That's a real thing. That's not like fake AI panic that we're seeing from the tech world.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it ends up like any other tech, what'll happen is one company will eventually get a monopoly on it, and any smaller company that tries to make anything cool in the space will be boxed out or bought up or put out of business by, that particular company, just like Microsoft in the 90s.
Bingo Dango says the people who signed that AI pause thing just want time to catch up to OpenAI and Microsoft so they don't get blown completely out of the space, which is a great point.
Yeah.
They want to look cool. They want to look like like futurists who are worried about Skynet. Oh, come on.
Yeah. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 505 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Mark. I'm calling from New Mexico.
Mark from New Mexico. What's on your mind?
Well, I usually listen to you guys, and I also listen to another presenter, James O'Brien. He's a British presenter, and he has a mantra that's compassion for the conned and contempt for the con men.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggle personally to implement that in American politics and even in my own life. I would like your opinions on it's easy to see that libs of TikTok reading to a bunch of kids. She's the con artist in that situation, and it's easy to have compassion for those kids. But it's hard to find the actual line. You know what I mean?
I totally agree with you. And I think that's... I don't know if the line is as static as maybe that phrase makes it seem between, say a content creator or a politician or a media figure and the people that are listening, because there are different tiers. Like, you can be a very active private citizen on social media spreading hate. You could be going to your school board meeting and spreading hate as well, activated in that way. I think that is more applicable in a political sense for people that are passively ignorant as opposed to actively being so. But I totally hear you about that tension.
Yeah. I mean, another question I have is
it's definitely a hard. Sometimes the con do become the con artists too. So it's it's hard sometimes to tell the difference. And I extend that even further a lot of times. Like I'm even you can tell who the true believers are, and then who are the people who are, and fortunately the true believers are usually, I mean, there's no better way to be in on the grift than to fully understand the bullshit you're peddling. We see this with white supremacists, conspiracy theorists. They just need to find the flock of people to con, and they're set. So yeah, it's definitely a great point. It's hard to not only separate the two, but also determine which of the con are able to be pulled out of it, because unfortunately a lot of times you just got to let them go too. Some people are so deep into the con sometimes that there's just nothing you could do for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much. I love your show. Keep
Thanks
it up.
so much. Thanks for the call.
Have a good one. Bye.
All right. This story is maybe my favorite of the day. Here we go. So this is a local news report from KRON4 in the Bay Area. And they are going to summarize some of what you can read about this story, because there was a press release sent out about a charge imposed, or charges being brought against the San Jose Police Officers Association head, the executive director of the San Jose Police Officers Association, Joanne Segovia, so head of a cop union, who has been, for years at this point, smuggling fentanyl into the United States and selling it. Here we go.
First, the director of the San Jose Police Officers Association facing drug charges tonight, accused of trafficking fentanyl to the Bay Area. Thanks for joining us at 10. I'm Ken Wayne.
I'm Pam Moore. Court documents claim that the union director was buying and selling fentanyl right under the nose of the Police Officers Association.
KRON 4's Ella Sogamonian tracking this developing story. She joins us now live from our newsroom. Ella.
Ken and Pam, the defendant has worked with the San Jose POA since 2003, and she allegedly started to buy and sell illegal drugs about 5 to 8 years ago, some linked to a death in Alabama. An investigation by Homeland Security into internationally produced drug shipments led agents to Joanne Segovia, who is the executive director of the San Jose Police Officers Association. Court documents claim she was dealing drugs and receiving shipments to both her home and office address, some that were seized and opened. The criminal complaint also alleges Segovia used personal and office computers to order thousands of illegal pills from countries like India and China in packages labeled wedding party favors and gift makeup, and that she allegedly used a Cash App account in her name linked to her work email for payments.
Jesus.
Segovia is now facing charges for importing and exporting opioids like fentanyl. Ladaris Cordell is a retired Superior Court judge and a former independent auditor of the police department in San Jose. She had this to say in response to the allegations.
It raises a lot of questions, and the issue is
Certainly.
Why didn't they know? And if they have anyone who is in charge of looking at the finances, checking the records and the books, it would seem that someone would have noticed that this was happening. So that's the concern here. So I think that the Police Officers Association has a lot of explaining to do.
San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan said in a statement, this is an incredibly disturbing allegation.
All right, we can wrap it here and pull up this thread that Jonah Owen Lamb put together, kind of with some of the details on it, who's a reporter for the San Francisco Standard. Here's some more details on this, frankly, just ridiculous story. This is the press release. If you could just scroll down here. Yeah, the subsequent tweets. In a number of interviews with Homeland Security, Joanne Segovia lied, saying she had only ordered supplements, then fingered her house cleaner. So she blamed her housekeeper on this.
Oh, that's whoops.
Naturally. What's crazier is that Customs and Border Patrol seized one of her shipments and sent a notice to her address in 2020, according to the federal complaint. Customs and Border Patrol, 2020. I wonder when that was. It's just interesting. I mean, like, Trump's still in office at that point. And even wilder, she signed a return shipping label with the San Jose Police Union's address. That was a part of it. In one exchange with her supplier, she apologizes for not making a shipment. "I'm so sorry. I'm on a business trip because we had 2 officers that got shot. I should be home tomorrow night, and I'll get them shipped as soon as I can." She had shipments coming from all around the world too: China, India, Hungary, Poland, and the Netherlands. This is also a part of the dirty little secret about fentanyl. It's not coming over the border in the way that the Republicans say it is. It's coming through ports of entry. In one iPhone email exchange with a supplier, her signature line read, "Executive Director of the San Jose Police Officers Association." So she was signing her emails about selling fentanyl with her San Jose Police Officers Association title, and just like the brazenness is amazing.
A few people in YouTube chat are saying, are referencing Walter White, but this literally is like him like rushing out of like chemistry class or like the dry cleaner to be like, "Hey, 1 second, I'm at work." Where is the shipment now?
If Walter White was an idiot who was signing
Walter White, Las Cruces High School or whatever it is.
And if he was doing it for no purpose except his own greed at the outset. Anyway,
I feel like we're sort of burying the lead here. I mean, I feel like we're looking at a real life Ellie from The Last of Us. We need to be extracting this lady's blood and creating some sort of vaccine. Folks, we've discovered the first cop to be able to interact with fentanyl
and not pass out,
and not passing out and seizure and drop down to the floor and start shaking profusely. This is amazing. This is incredible, folks.
How is she handling it? How is she handling it at scale and not immediately overdosing?
How is she not dead from nonstop seizures? I mean, they should know just how much fentanyl she's been using based on the paper trail of all the times she's ostensibly been taken to the hospital. Quite frankly, I mean, this lady is a first for police. Amazing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that, ultimately that first woman who was criticizing the police officers who didn't know was being too critical, because I could imagine her walking into the office just like covered in fentanyl dust and like every other cop just passing out to the floor and not waking up until she has left the room. Like, like a
weapon of
Dr.
mass
Who
overdose.
Like
the entire force collapses, like just a one by one while she walks in.
Yeah, like they just like black out until she's in her office, and they just like wake up and they go, "Oh, okay, Segovia must be in today," and they don't put the two together, obviously.
Yeah, that's like, wasn't that one that was a power that one of the villains in that show Heroes had, right? Where you're able to like, "Whoa, I'm dazed and confused. I don't know what happened."
The Men in Black memories app.
Oh yeah. She's got that.
Actually,
she's got that juice.
Now that you mention it, Brandon, I think we may have just accidentally solved Havana syndrome.
Honestly, there we go. But like, okay, so just to Binder's point, these cops that are overdosing from touching fentanyl, some of these cops are just taking fentanyl, and there's definitely drug rings within these organized crime units disguised as police units, and it's just like they have a badge and they act with total impunity and feel like they're above the law because in her instance she was leaving paper trails everywhere.
Yeah, that's what's interesting to me.
And no one went after her.
Not to sound too conspiratorial, but like, how is she possibly the only one involved when she's signing her emails with her
no
role
chance
and using her return address as the union's headquarters for some of these packages? It strains credulity to think that she's doing this by herself this irresponsibly with no one else noticing until now.
Right.
I think this is, the classic way that conspiracies are occluded, for lack of a better word, in our society. We have so many people in government in positions of power who are willing to cop, like, no, I'm just really stupid. I'm so stupid and so incurious that you can get basically anything by me, but I shouldn't be removed from power. Yeah. I shouldn't be removed from my position of authority because that's not this. No. I don't worry about that. Or you're forced to make the accusation, perhaps sans evidence that there's a larger conspiracy or corruption or malfeasance going on. Or they could just all be selling drugs independently of each other. That's another option that could be going up. So, it's a real don't ask, don't tell situation in the San Jose Police Officers Bureau, where it's like, well, we're all getting mysterious packages delivered here. We don't want anyone looking too close into anything.
Look, I mean, honestly, if the right wants to get serious about cracking down on fentanyl, which they say they care so deeply about, as they mock Hunter Biden for having a drug addiction publicly every day in the midst of hearings.
Trump wants to go into Mexico with the military
and
over
bomb
this.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Hey, how about we look into, I don't know, some of our police unions, because like, look, I none of this stuff is verifiable, and it's just, you know, TikToks and things like that. Like that account Chuds of TikTok, which is meant to counteract Libs of TikTok, was posting videos that a citizen, I think in Kansas City, took of a police unit that came to his house, and one of the cops was clearly high, like clearly slurring his words, leaning up against a wall. And this is just a bunch of like trickles of information about cops using on the job, the fentanyl crisis being a bit more widespread than we know, and then they're claiming that it's like a line of duty hazard because they touched it, when like maybe you're just like doing some drugs on the side, and there are drug rings within these police units, maybe that are leading to these kinds of situations, and they're just trying to cover it up. Maybe. Anyway, so that story's hilarious. Also, the fact that she looks like a caricature of the ultimate Karen, being the woman who is distributing,
pushing product. She looks like a PTA mom. Like,
I mean, she's definitely in another life. She'd be at the school board meeting saying, "Get the CRT out of my kids' schools."
No affordable housing downtown.
And instead, she's just pushing deadly drugs that are killing people throughout the country.
To be fair, we don't know that she's not also doing that.
She's also a PTA mom.
She's moonlighting as that. Good point. So we can't rule that out. All right, let's take another call really quickly. Calling from a 302 area code. 302, who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Lucy. I'm calling from Delaware.
Lucy from Delaware.
Hi, I just wanted to call. I recently got into an conversation with my family because they're going to Florida, and we started talking about stuff. And sorry, I'm a little nervous.
You're all good.
But I was talking to them, and they were talking to me about the Don't Say Gay bill and the recent expansion and stuff, because for me it's kind of a personal issue, but for them it's not as much. So they're not really thinking about that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of, ambiguity in the bill itself, but I do think that maybe people should probably start like listing the names of these bills and stuff, like where they're from, the House or the Senate, what number the bill is and what standards it refers to in their reporting, because I'm looking at the bill now, and it really feels like a lot of times when these things get reported on, the text of the bill doesn't get really talked about, but the text of the bill itself is actually pretty damning.
Mm-hmm.
In Section 3 of the bill itself, it says, classroom instruction by personnel. We've heard it a bunch, but at the end, it specifically refers to in accordance with state standards. So I went ahead and looked up the state standards that it's actually referring to, and it refers to specifically Section 1003.46, which is health education, instruction, and acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And Part 2 says throughout instruction in acquired immune deficiency syndrome, sexually transmitted diseases, or health and education, when such instruction or course material contains instruction in human sexuality, a school shall teach abstinence from sexual education outside of marriage as the expected standards for all school-age students, while also teaching the benefits of monogamous heterosexual marriage. So, a lot of times I think referring to these bills specifically as their numbers and stuff, and making it really easy for people to look up what the bill itself says and what the stuff it's referring to says, can make it really easy for people to understand just how ridiculous a lot of these laws are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's helpful, and just like laying it out in clear terms. I also just want to re-highlight what I did in what I highlighted in headlines today, which is that this it broke around an hour before the show started, so I need to do more reading into it. But like, they're coming in the court system too. This federal judge in Texas blocking the ACA mandate that health insurance companies have to cover preventative care, specifically targeting PrEP, which is the prophylactic HIV drug for gay men mostly, and others as well, but often like the reasoning in the what the plaintiffs were pushing was explicitly homophobic. Like that ruling from a federal judge is immediately law right now because he's a federal judge. And then any appeal process has to go through the Fifth Circuit, which is incredibly right wing, and then has to go to the Supreme Court. Like, they are coming after gay, non-binary, trans, LGBTQ people in every direction, every facet imaginable. And the group that's funding that legal challenge to the ACA, headed by Stephen Miller.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about that kind of stuff. No.
Yeah, yeah. So my point is just like, yes, of course it's Florida, and you got into that discussion with your family about it, but they're coming on the federal level too through these challenges through right-wing courts where they know they have a fair shake, or in their estimation, like a fair shake for their extremist ideas. So, but anyway, thank you for highlighting that. I really appreciate the call. Thanks, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
All right, let's play one more clip here. The Jamal Bowman clip. You got it? Okay. Here is Jamal Bowman, who has been in his life before he was in Congress a principal. He's an educator. So he has emotional, direct experience with what it's like to protect children in the school system. And so he kind of went off and was vocally incredibly frustrated about the Republicans in the House, now they have the majority, refusing to support gun control legislation in the wake of yet another school shooting in Tennessee. And Bowman basically calls out Republicans to their face and gets into it with one of the more pro-gun representatives in the House, Thomas Massie. Take a look.
Ask them, and they go to the Senate, ask the same questions. They're cowards. They're all cowards. They won't do anything to save the lives of our children at all. Cowards. Pressure them. Force them to respond to the question, why the hell won't you do anything to save America's children? And let them explain that all the way up until election day on 2024. Let them explain it all the way up to election day on 2024. They're freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been
I'm talking about gun violence.
in a school that allows teachers to carry.
Oh my God. Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby. Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. Good states that have open carry laws have more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more deaths. Are you listening to what I'm saying? Calm down. Children are dying. 9-year-old children. The solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? 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 It's a yes or no question. Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk to me. Okay, I'll bring it down a notch.
Yeah. Thomas Massie has not worked in a school, but he has raised a lot of money from corporations, and I'm pretty sure he has some trails of breadcrumbs that will lead to organizations like the NRA. But let this image speak for itself here. Thomas Massie, that's the representative getting into it with Jamal Bowman there. Jamal Bowman's actually worked with children, understands what it means to protect them, to have their well-being in mind. Thomas Massie knows everything about guns and ammunition. And I just want to reiterate this point that I made earlier as well, because I think it can't be overstated. Republicans refusing to act on gun control is not just because they have an obsession with guns and they see it as in their political best interest. They also don't really care to do anything about gun control because they're fine with public spaces being fairly unsafe, and public spaces include our public institutions like schools. From their efforts to go after critical race theory, make schools inhospitable to teachers, particularly if they're LGBTQ or Black, non-conservative in states like Florida. Their years-long efforts to undercut teachers' unions, demonizing them on Fox News over and over and over again, forcing them back into schools during COVID, not listening to the Chicago Teachers Union, saying that they're against the children that they are employed for very low wages to educate and protect and spend time with on a daily basis. From the opposition to free school lunches in other states. Thankfully, Minnesota just passed it, but you saw the extremism from the Republican minority on the Minnesota State House floor basically arguing against it, saying that that should not be a part of what a public school provides. They are deeply invested ideologically to their core, the Republican Party, in ensuring that the institution of public school, and I know that in this Tennessee instance, it was a private school, but still, this is a part of like a broader effort in making these spaces inhospitable largely. And so this all ties into it. They're all about private rights, my private right to own a gun, my private right to hoard as much capital as possible at the expense of other people because they're not interested in constructing a collective society.
If I may, could I play these two short clips of Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett?
Yes, the guy talking about homeschooling.
Yes, being asked about the first clip, just being asked what if anything Congress can do to fix it, and then asked about what he would do to protect his daughter.
Yeah,
just because I think this is pretty emblematic of that exact dichotomy.
Go ahead.
So this is the first clip, and then I'll get to the second one after.
This actually is like what sparked that thought I had, this very clip, so great minds here.
3 precious little kids lost their lives, and I believe 3 adults, I believe it's, and the shooter, of course, lost their life too. So it's a horrible, horrible situation, and we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Conservatives have a very fatalistic view of society. Even if you take that at like face value and you take that at face value and like, oh, he's not lying just so we can, avoid doing anything. It's just like, that is something that conservatives express a lot, that there is no point to society because there's very little that it can serve to do that, a private corporation can't do, your family, an extended group of like acquaintances can't do for you better. And, you either believe that and have a very reactionary view about society, or you don't. You believe that we can do things like public health and that this constitutes like a public health crisis. And, it's just unfortunate that our conversation is dominated by people who more believe like him, that, well, because our society's infrastructure has been, designed to fail in some ways and also eroded by the actions of people who share his ideology and closely related ideologies, then there's nothing that any society might do to prevent this. Don't look at any other society that doesn't have this and has prevented it. It's unpreventable.
It's a way for them to undercut government more broadly too, right, Brandon? Like, because if you don't, if society can't be better, then what's the point in having a robust government that like provides for the public good? Yeah, it's
the austerity cycle. You weaken organizations until they become ineffective. Then you go like, look at how ineffective they are. We should weaken them some more.
Yes.
And what makes it more stark in this case is it shows you again either how exceptional Americans think they are or how incurious they are, because we're just the only country in the world who lives like this. And it's just a problem that doesn't have to exist. I know it's like deeply rooted in like American, imperialistic cultural traditions that we got to have our guns. What if the, I hate to say it, what if the engines come across the plains and attack our settlement? It's just like, we don't live in that world anymore. And people still want to pretend like, nowadays it's not the Native Americans, it's not the Black slave uprising, it's not the Muslims, but it's the, LGBTQ Antifa gender terrorists who are going to come for us. We're just a countries that's been clinging to our guns for so long that we've forgotten that it's due to paranoid fear. And even when people talk about arming themselves on the left, it's always in opposition to that like deeper imperialist culture of guns and maybe reclaiming it. It doesn't say it doesn't exist. It's just like you can be an island in that culture, but the gun culture in America is very deeply dominated by the position that like, what if someone breaks into my home and tries to attack my 3 young babies and wife? I got to have an AR-15. And that person tends to be, brown skinned, maybe a different religion, when in reality, it just doesn't even reflect how violence in this country happens, which is usually by someone
Yeah, we had a caller go speaking to that articulating that very fear that you say, Brandon, sincerely. But Bradley, it has the second clip. Let's play this too, because this just is under. It's helping our points that we're trying to make in this segment here.
What should be done to protect people like your little girl from being safe at school?
Well, we homeschool her, but that's our decision. Some people don't have that option, and frankly, some people don't need to do it. I mean, they don't have to. It just suited our needs much better.
Thank you.
You good?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's the thing. If you want to protect your children, you have to have the capacity, the money to privatize their education through homeschooling or going to some school. I mean, even in this instance, this was a private school, but again, it is about undercutting our public institutions, primarily public education.
And the implication of that statement is essentially, well, we wouldn't have that problem. My daughter's safe because she's in my house, and I have guns in my house.
No one's ever been shot in their home.
Right. He also provided no answer to that question because he doesn't care. I mean, like,
right, exactly.
He still could have said, to be clear, about my daughter doesn't go to public school, but what we should do or what we can do. No, he was just like, oh, my kid's not involved. That's it. I'm out of here. I'm not gonna give you an answer.
She's fine.
Not my problem. Not my problem.
Yeah, what is your job? He's a representative from Tennessee. Tennessee. They are the ones that just experienced the state, that shooting. And he's saying there's nothing, like, what's my job? Pfft, I'm not doing my job. I don't need to do my job. What's my job as a representative for this state? To think about my own kid.
After all of the concerned uncles at PTA meetings, you almost have to award at least him admitting that like he doesn't really have as much skin in the game, or he doesn't perceive himself as having as much skin in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just so happens I watch a lot of God's Not Dead movies, and this is what the 4th one is about, I want to say. And yeah, it just so happens that if you homeschool your kid, you can also reinforce all your values to them. They never will come into contact with values that you don't explicitly agree with, or likely they won't unless they get it through social media, but you can control that pretty well too. And by the time you let them out of the house, like, they'll most likely just be little reflections of you. Yep. And so it just fits neatly into a certain right-winger's prescription for their children's anyway.
It's just narcissism as disguised as parenting. Like, they don't want their child to grow or be anything except a mirror image of their own idea of the world.
Right.
I'm glad Bethany Mandel wasn't here to hear that.
Who? I'm sorry?
I'm glad Bethany Mandel's not here to say that. We wouldn't want her to break down again.
A lot of it also plays into that really weird mentality that like you own your kids. Like I think that's one of the grossest things that comes from out of all of this, that like you don't view your own children as their own person, as their own people who will grow up and be themselves, have their own personality that may very well be very distinct and different than yours. No, you just view them as, you brought them into this world, you can take them out. I hate that sort of mentality. It's so gross. So
weird.
Gross.
I think that's a unfortunately deeply held belief within our society. But I think a lot of that also, is at least stems from a particular subsection of our society that is allowed to wield their kids like weapons against the rest of us. And if you don't have that, control over them, if you're like a suburban household who wants to be like, my little Jimmy shouldn't be exposed to this, and Jimmy goes like, I want to be exposed to this. And by this, I mean like Drag Story Hour or CRT or like Disney movies that are too woke, then they don't get to position themselves as parents who are willing, who are propagating society, putting forth the next generation, and therefore should have extra say over this sort of stuff, because it's not every parent who thinks this way. And certainly, even if it were every parent who thinks this way, we don't let every parent like put themselves on the news and tell us that we have to reorganize society because they don't like what books their kid is reading. Because certainly if a black family did that about having to read about all the goddamn slave owners in our society's history, we wouldn't even entertain that. But if it's the middle class family from
pushing against it with the anti-CRT stuff. Sorry, go on.
No, but if it's a middle class family who's better able to index traditional status quo values, then yeah, sure, come on television and tell us not just what's your kid, but what some kid you're vaguely related to, what you think they should have, and how we should reorganize society for that. Okay, it's transparent.
Yeah.
You know what they say? Cowards always hide behind rules and kids.
I like that. All right, guys. I don't think we're gonna have enough time for calls. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to do this. I apologize.
We did take like two or three though. It wasn't like
three. We took three. That's usually my. I'm like, I feel if I only take two, I feel really bad. If I take three, that's decent. I was hoping to take four today, but I'm sorry. We just had so much stuff to get to. I'm gonna read like 15 more AMs and get out of here. 10,
sure you don't want to
15.
read maybe 16 or maybe 14 or
I don't know. Maybe I'll settle on that. I'm not even going to count, and we'll just see where it falls. The audience can do that for me.
That's what Sam does, though. Is like Sam will say
he sets a limit and then exceeds it every time.
Sam will say 10 more and we'll get out of here, and I'm like, he's on 14, and he's like, all right, 6 more.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not how that works. But okay.
What'll usually happen to me on my stream is I'll say, all right, I'll take one more call. I take that call, and just as I hang up on that call, some Twitch streamer raids me, and then I'm forced to stay for another like 2 hours.
Gets to bed at 2 a.m.
The people get what they want.
I had to look up that quote that I just said to make sure it wasn't like secretly from like a Nazi, because ever since the Voltaire thing that goes around all the time, I'm always concerned that I've been tricked.
Is it?
I couldn't find it.
All right, there you go. Maybe it just came from your mind.
No, it's probably from Supernatural episode. There's just a lot of them.
There's way too many. Did you see that Blue Bloods was I just saw someone quote tweeted
I cannot believe that show's still on. My grandmother loved that show.
14th season renewed, and someone just
Ladies
was like,
love
there's
Tom
a whole
Selleck.
nother world that we just are not in, right? That we're not aware of existing. But in my mind, I was like, Brandon knows, but he's our crossover.
Is Rizzoli and Isles still on the air too?
Well, there's like a new hospital or like emergency response show that populates like there's East New York now, which is about like Brooklyn law enforcement. There's Fire Country about like the fire departments like fighting wildfires in California. I'm like, how
aren't those prisoners though?
I think they probably switch up the IP there, that they make them like, Dennis Leary lookalikes instead of.
Well, I mean, they brought back original SVU. I mean, they brought back original Law and Order. SVU never left, but
then there's Law and Order Organized Crime now. I'm like, how many eyeballs are on these screens?
I love the Law and Order cinematic universe. Yeah.
I don't know if this is true, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw that Grey's Anatomy is still a thing, and the main character isn't even in it anymore. Like they just kept it going.
She's Meredith Grey has finally signed off.
Thank God. They've killed everybody on that show.
She was the
but
last
the show's still
remaining
going,
original.
right?
Yeah,
but the show's still going.
Still going.
How did that show become like a show that kind of won awards and was fairly compelling to one of the trashiest, like most ridiculous, almost daytime television level Days of Our Lives soap operas
I will cop. I have seen like almost every episode of the show. Like I do love it, and especially like you said, Emma, it was far more engaging like the first like 5 seasons.
Yeah,
but like they switched. Like Shonda Rhimes stopped doing day to day, and then it just started being like really schlocky.
Makes sense.
I think when you're young and you're like online, it's easy to like think that, wow, things have changed so much. But like, if you really think about it, I was talking about this last night with somebody too. It's just like, Steve Harvey is still hosting the Family Feud. If you didn't want to, you could have not changed your viewing habits for like 20 years.
I know.
Nothing has really, Criminal Minds is like season 25. It's like, not everything is Marvel movies. It's easy to forget that some people don't even watch movies. Our culture is just not necessarily a monolith, and that like, I believe it. Blue Bloods season 17. Why they might never take it off the air. It would kill my grandma. She loves that show.
I would actually love to find the person who's living exactly like you just said, like who's just watching those same shows. They don't even go online to get the news. They watch those shows and then keep the channel on for the 11 o'clock local news right after.
And
that's where they get. and that's where they get all their news. Like, I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are born in like the 1920s, 30s, and 40s who still consume like that. But I would love to just sit down and talk with
science experiment. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Let's read some IMs. Dave from Jamaica says Law and Order mini golf unit. Aaron is not cool. Shout out to Ellen Pompeo. She's got the best house in all of AD. What do you mean AD? AD? She always seemed cool, though. Number 13, can you explain the dissonance within Republican voters that continue to vote for leaders that tell them that the government, which they voted in, isn't helpful? How are they mobilized to vote if they are told the government is worthless? Why do so many people even continue to exist under the jurisdiction of a nation? Well, they're very good at creating an enemy. So, like, there are multiple facets of government. Those kinds of voters are just more interested in, like, the anti-other human being group thing. There are some people, who are who are traditional conservatives in that party, but it's becoming fewer and further between who actually want to dismantle, like, vote people in to dismantle government. Attorney Andrew, as a follow-up to the Romney clip to start the episode, you didn't have to be a bad company to be unionized. Companies do not choose to unionize, their employees do. And there's no minimum number of employees needed to form a union. Many bargaining units across the country have only a single employee in the union. Are you hearing this, Bradley, Emma, Matt, in absentia? Yeah, I hear you. Charlie Sheeher, I had a big fight with my dad last year over the Don't Say Gay bill. He fell for the K-3 line and completely left out the other half of the sentence, which stated only where age appropriate in other grades, and then told me to go read the bill. I did. I don't think he's unreasonable, but goddamn, it's frustrating. Stay safe, all. Yeah, and DeSantis is trying to make it K-12 now. So your point, almost immediately, within a year, completely validated. Fart Twain. The Alaska Senate passed a bill giving them a 67% raise and the governor a 20% raise, while the union-exempt state employees got their first raise since 2016 last year. Only 5%, which doesn't even keep up with inflation. I'm all in favor of paying politicians well, but that should be criminal. Sorry for only sending Alaska politics. It's the only thing I'm up on. Yeah, well, Fart Twain, thank you for writing in. I did see that Mary, what's her last name? The only Alaska representative, Mary
Peltola.
Peltola. Sorry, I just didn't want to butcher that. She didn't vote to break the rail strike, which is appreciated, and she's been a little bit more vocal on workers' rights. So, I mean, but in terms of the state government, I'd imagine it's a complete cesspool. Unverified user says, hey, EmMajority crew, I know there's a lot going on right now, but I want to remind everyone that the Restrict Act is more than just a TikTok ban. It's more like a Patriot Act on steroids. Good point. We should do a deeper dive into that as well. Matt writes in saying, the police union president trafficking fentanyl is a feature of the system, not a bug. Funding these people is literally killing us and degrading society. Meg from Portland says, you can't break bad if you were already bad. Good point. Hack All the Things says, I listened to most of the episodes of the James O'Brien show. The cons he mentions are mostly apolitical people who believe the wrong thing because it's all over the news presented as fact, like how Brexit would make everything better financially. I also recall him saying, sometimes bringing up how UK news has started changing to less fact-based since Rupert Murdoch started creating newspapers and news channels in the UK. I mean, speaking of an astroturfed anti-trans campaign, Murdoch brought that from the UK to the US. That's a UK import, and he's been successful in both instances. Window Shopper. Emma, completely off topic, but tonight at midnight, Phoebe Bridgers' band Boy Genius is releasing an album. It's getting rave reviews. Tap in. You think I'm not up on that? I'm a white girl that lives in Brooklyn. You think I'm not up on that?
Not sure if you'd care, but...
Oh, yeah, I care.
Target Phoebe Bridgers demographic.
Look at me, okay? Brett from PA. Pat Robertson was the political right for decades. There was no one more activated than him and his audience, so there's no real point in differentiating the activated right and non-activated right when comparing a Robertson video from a decade ago to what's going on today. All right, well said. 3 more. Woke Fetus says, glad to see MR finally letting Bradley cook this week. Oh, yeah, he's cooking. He's cooking with gas. New England Clam Chowder. If Marjorie Taylor Greene's podcast is MTG Online, then Wizards of the Coast should sue her for ruining the Magic the Gathering's reputation. And the final I am of the Window Shopper says, you're the one who said you were late on Phoebe's music. My bad. LOL. I really was just messing with you. I was just trying to make a joke. I'm amused. That's all. The real final I am of the day. Tater tot. The right-wing prime minister of Italy was at a speech attended by members of Italy's big unions, and they sang the anti-fascist song Bella Ciao at her. Apparently the song was the anthem of the resistance movement opposing fascism during World War II. We should try to find that video, if there is any video. And I had someone on like a few months ago about Italy, but we have to keep up on that. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Great show. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Binder. Check out Doom, Scam Economy, The Discourse. Check out Left Reckoning, ESVN. Appreciate you all. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months shifted into years while I shifted in and out of